Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington with my pals Evan, Grant, and Joe Hoyt on this rainy Tuesday morning as we're taping this. I hope it's you're getting a nice soak wherever you are. We as we're taping this, obviously the Stars played last night and squared their series at 1-1 going back to Minnesota after a horrific performance in game one, a 6-1 loss. They get a 4-2 win. They woke up for game two and got physical, and that's what they do. The Wild accused the Stars of not wanting to hang with them at 5-on-5 and that they have to get on the power play, and that's what they're trying to do, which, yes, that is accurate. So we'll see how the Stars go from this point. I picked the Stars to win it all this year, which means, of course, they'll probably be a first-round flameout. But anyway, we'll see how they do. So this week, big week for the Cowboys. The draft starts on Thursday, and there's already Jerry started a nice little ruckus. I see on the national news outlets the rumors about the possibilities of the Cowboys trading up. So, Joe, let's just start right there. Let me ask that question. Do you think Jerry Jones will trade up
I
in the
love
first
and hate
round?
this draft so much because I love that it's dripping with so much chaos. And I think when Thursday rolls around, like there's gonna be like the expected is the unexpected, right? And so I love that. Um, I hate it because there are so many options for the Cowboys that I've talked myself into 1,000 different scenarios. And so I think I'm going to try to go back to the root of what I think they'll actually do. And I don't think they'll trade up. Like I think that it makes all the sense in the world to do it. I think that they need an instant impact defender. I think that there's only a few elite ones. I do not have the optimistic view that 6 offensive guys are going to go in the top 11, which would allow someone from a defensive perspective to be there at 12. I just don't think all that factors in, and I just don't think they're going to get a trade offer that they want on their terms. It's funny. I was literally listening to a video earlier this morning about them trying to trade up for Paxton Lynch, and Jerry was mad because they didn't do the deal that Denver did to go get Paxton Lynch. Right? They didn't give enough. They weren't willing to part with that pick, and they were mad about it. They regretted it. I think that's just their MO. And I don't think that they're going to, quote, learn from that experience and go get Caleb Downs or Sonny Styles. And I say all this to say this is why I love and hate this draft so much. I hate it because, from a prediction standpoint, for my mock drafts and my final prediction, I did put that they're going to trade up. And I feel like I'm covering bases. And I kind of hate everything right now. But in my heart of hearts, I don't think they'll trade up.
Well, I want to just say, let me just say this right away, Joe. I think the fact that they didn't trade it to Paxton Lynch, and that was the best thing that could have happened to him, is the lesson that probably Jerry thinks he's learned from it, and so he doesn't want to do that. So we'll see. But yeah, okay. If I'm looking at this thing now with the Cowboys, I think the possibilities as it develops, if someone starts to drop, if Arvell Reese starts to drop, if David Bailey starts to drop, if people make decisions, then I can see them doing that. Let me ask you this. How do you think it impacts the top 10 with the Giants getting the
Yeah, I think
Bengals
it just
pick
gives the
at
Giants
10?
more options. And I think when you look at the root of what they did with that deal, that was strictly a value play. The fact that they were able to get a 10th overall pick for Dexter Lawrence, while they love Dexter Lawrence, they not only clear a bunch of money, but they were able to get another cheap rookie that they can come in with a high value top 10 pick. Like, that's awesome for the Giants, right? But I think the only thing it does is it just kind of allows for even more potential chaotic energy, especially at 5. Like, I think if you look at what the Giants need, for a long time, I've thought that they would take Caleb Downs at 5, and I still think that that's possible. But you could talk yourself into the idea, if you're the Giants, that, well, maybe he'll be there at 10. So in my final full first round mock draft, I had Arvell Reese there at 5, right? And one thing we know about the Giants, they don't need an edge rusher. That's one category where they are totally fine, right? Between Brian Birds, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Abdul Carter, who they drafted 3rd overall last year. So in that case, they traded back with New Orleans at 8 to go get who went and got Arvell Reese. And then if you're the Giants in that scenario, you're thinking, okay, there's a chance that Caleb Downs falls to 8, or if he's gone and Sonny Styles is gone, we just settle and we take Jordan Tyson and Francis Maui Noah at 8 and 10. And next thing you know, we have and two offensive guys to be our foundational piece. So long story short, like I think we knew what the Bengals were going to do at 10, right? We knew that they wanted defense and preferably someone on the defensive line, maybe a replacement for Trey Hendrickson or something in that regard. Now I think we have more chaos potential in front of the Cowboys because I think the Giants could be willing to move back from 5 if they can talk themselves into it.
Yeah, because if the Giants stay there, you would think, well, first of all, they got to replace Dexter Lawrence, but there's no defensive tackle worth that pick that high. So that that does make you feel like maybe the Giants will trade down again, pick up more picks, and then into a range where they would take a defensive tackle, right?
Or I mean, they've had
trade
DJ
down.
Reader in for visits. Like I think that they also feel that they don't need to replace Dexter Lawrence per se, right? Like they don't need to use a first round edge pick to replace Micah Parsons, right? Like that's not the thought process there. I think that they think they can get by
Right.
with a veteran defensive tackle with the group they already have, and they can use that resources elsewhere. So I think it just opens up a lot more possibilities. Like this draft needed any more possibilities, but I think that that's what it did.
If the Cowboys were going to trade up, what do you think is the ceiling on that? Is it the fifth pick? Is it the sixth? The ninth?
Yeah, I do
what
think
do you think that
just
in?
from like talking to some people and reading tea leaves, like I don't think that they ideally want to leave the 20th pick, or if they leave the 20th pick, they don't want to go back too far, because I think that they know they need multiple instant impact guys, right? And I think that makes things a little bit iffy when you're talking about the ceiling for where they could trade up. Like, yeah, if you want to go all the way to 3, you're gonna have to give up 12, 20, 92, or maybe a next year's first round pick, right, or something to that extent to move up all the way to get to 3. So I just don't see that kind of scenario happening. I think in my opinion, the real partner for the Cowboys is the Browns at 6. I think it makes too much sense for what Cleveland wants, and therefore that they might be kind of willing to compromise a little bit in terms of the value and the cost to go for the Cowboys to go up. And I think it just makes all the sense in the world for Dallas to go secure a star instant impact defender for Christian Parker's defense. So Kansas City's another one potentially, but like when you look at Kansas City, like I think that they might want to stick and draft, a best player available, either an edge rusher like Ruben Bain, if Mansour Delane is there, to replace some of the corners that they've lost. They've basically traded their entire secondary to Los Angeles. So I think like these are things that make sense in terms of where the Cowboys might go. In my opinion, it feels like 6 or bust.
Okay, and so at 6, then would that be Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs,
Yeah,
Mansour
I think
Delane?
that's
Who would
kind of the
that be
trio
at
you look
6?
at, and I think specifically it would be Caleb Downs or Sonny Styles, depending on what kind of happens in front of you. But the thing that I've kind of heard, I've heard there's a chance that Sonny Styles goes 4 to Tennessee, and like I think it also depends if Jeremiah Love goes 3 to Arizona, right? I think Robert Saleh might want to get his Fred Warner, and I think that Sonny Styles might be the most in terms of talented off-ball linebacker prospect we've seen in quite some time to potentially be that Fred Warner for Tennessee's defense. So I think you start looking at it like that's why I'm saying if you want to wait to 12, man, you are someone that likes anxiety. You are someone that loves to feel dangerous. It is going to be a long night for the Cowboys if they decide to stick at 12, and it might work. Truth be told, it might work, but it will not come without a huge slap in the face of anxiety.
Yeah, and I don't think that Cowboys fans want that either. Yeah, I got to tell you, I'm in this whole process of thinking about, okay, yeah, you do need multiple players, but this is what we know about this draft so far is that it's lacking in top end talent. It has a few stars, and most of those will be gone by the time the Cowboys draft. So, do you? I mean, I'm on record
Yeah.
about the whole thing about the linebacker, right? And I'm good with any of those guys that I just mentioned. But the whole problem at linebacker for the Cowboys is my theory on them is that because we know the position at linebacker and safety both have been undervalued, right, for years now, and it's almost like the Cowboys just said it's undervalued, so let's just forget about it. and not even thinking about it at all. And that's not the way to go. When the position presents itself with a player of that caliber, you have to consider the possibilities of what that brings to your defense and what it can mean. And you just mentioned Fred Warner, Bobby Wagner, guys like that who play in the league for, if you get the right kind of linebacker, he's good enough. He might play for you 12 or 13, 14 years. I mean, that's the staying power of that position. And I think that this Cowboys defense needs that kind of thing more than just about anything, except of course an edge rusher. So that's how I'm kind of torn in all of this, is that do they I can see them spending to get up to take one of the two guys, right? Either Arvell Reese or David Bailey, if they could get him. I don't see them. I guess what I'm saying is I don't see them trading up to get Sonny Styles or Caleb Downs. I think they would hope one of those guys would drop. I do think that Jeremiah Love goes to somebody. If it's not the Cardinals, he's somebody else in the top 10. He's just too good of a talent. So we'll see. Evan, what do you think? You got an opinion?
Yeah, I was waiting for, since we were doing a roundtable where we were all going to say what the Cowboys were doing, I was just waiting for my chance. Yeah, it didn't
You waiting
seem
for
to
your
come.
turn?
Yeah, the Cowboys are trading up. I mean, I'm not going to overthink this like you guys. And I appreciate how much effort you've put into it, but here's my opinion as the more casual here. This team needs an impact defensive player. It needs multiple impact defensive players. The chances of getting multiple impact defensive players in this draft, probably not very good. So here's what I'm doing. I'm addressing the best need that I can fill in the first round with the best possible player. And if that means trading into the top 6, if that means trading into the top 5, then I'm going to take what resources I can and try everything I can to make that move. Because, shocker of all shockers, when you trade Micah Parsons, to go back to a story that's only lasted for a year, you're going to be lacking at an edge rusher. And if the Cowboys can find some way to get Bailey or Reese, they need to do it. And beyond that, I mean, I'm going off of Joe's take on so much of this. Sonny Styles sounds like a generational type of linebacker in terms of smarts and athleticism. And maybe it's not as much of an impact as an edge rusher, but he's the best linebacker in this draft, is he not? And
Yeah.
go get him.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing too with that, like if you go back to the crux of the Cowboys' issues last year and on defense, and there were a ton, um, a lot. One of the biggest things though was what happened from basically the spine outwards, right? And then it's what happened from the central nervous system, the mental side of things. They were not aligned like often. Like there was miscommunications often. There was people out of place. There was people that did not know what position they were supposed to be in certain coverages, and then when they would check, they couldn't communicate it correctly. So having someone who can get everyone on the same page, be the spine of that defense, the central nervous system, that is going to be, in their opinion, a huge development for this. Like, I think that for a guy like Malik Hooker, for example, right? Like, I think a lot of fans will like get rid of Malik Hooker, right? I think there's belief that like, okay, like Malik Hooker is going to be better in this system than he was last year, because if they can get someone who can get everyone on the same page and aligned, and I think Christian Parker plays a huge role in that. But they need an arm of Christian Parker on the field that can help get everyone aligned. Christian Parker's not going to be down there, in a linebacker stance, communicating to everyone, right? They need someone to get them aligned. And to your point, Evan, Sonny Styles, I think, pretty quickly could be that person for them.
Look, I mean, I think
Well, let me ask
from
you.
y'all's
Go
perspective,
ahead, Ed.
there are 4 guys in the first round that really would potentially help the Cowboys. Reese, Bailey. I'm not sure on the Ruben Bain thing at this point in time, but I put Sonny Styles and Caleb Downs in that group. Maybe you want to expand it to 5 and put Bain in there, fine. But I've got to get one of those guys. I've got to. Otherwise, I don't think I'm addressing my most prominent needs in the first round. And if you don't do that the way this team is set up, you're just setting yourself up for failure again. So that's why, I mean, maybe maybe I've oversimplified it, and I know so much of the draft these days is about value, value, value. But the Cowboys need impact defensive players, and there's so few of them in this draft. They need to make sure they get one of them.
Well, let me ask you this,
Kevin
Joe,
just ignores my
because
response.
and Evan, no, I was about to say before you got your feelings hurt that those were all really good points, and I like them. But here's the thing I'm thinking now, Joe. So there's no question they got to get a linebacker. They didn't get one in free agency. They have to get a linebacker. Now Sonny Styles is the best linebacker, but we know that you can also have a guy out there who's not quite as good as him, who's probably a Jacob Rodriguez, who gets rave reviews at Texas Tech, or a CJ Allen at Georgia. Is there a possibility that they could trade up, keep the 20th pick as part of the 20th pick would not be part of that deal, and they put a pick in from next year to trade up that would allow them to get, Reese or Bailey, and then they could still get a linebacker at 20 with Rodriguez. First of all, well, let me ask if that's you think that's possible, and secondly, is Rodriguez is 22 high?
Let me start with the trade part. I do think
Yep.
that is kind of the ace up the sleeve potential, right? And I think that's going to be a big, if we're talking storyline within the storyline, is whether or not the Cowboys are willing to part with 2027 picks to move up. And I think that there's a possibility because those have more value than before, considering the talent in the 2027 draft, especially as we kind of sit here today, what we think is going to be a quarterback, right? So, for example, if you're Cleveland and you have Shedeur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, Deshaun Watson, and you're thinking, hey, we're cool with that this season, kind of, but let's get some picks for next year too, just in case. What if the Cowboys are willing to part with the 2027 second round pick as well? That would give you them more ammo to potentially move up and secure a quarterback. Not like they would really need it. Let's call a spade. But, to move up in the draft and go get a quarterback next season. I think that could be the ace up the sleeve for a team like the Cowboys if they're willing to do it, because they do not need a quarterback next year, right? And I think that they want instant impact guys. And I think that would be the biggest telltale sign that they truly believe they could have an instant impact difference this season and go on a run with Dak Prescott in that offense. I think there's a possibility of that. In terms of linebacker, a guy like Jacob Rodriguez at 20, I have a bold predictions or final thoughts piece coming out later today. Have you guys seen the movie Draft Day by chance? It's really, yeah. So Vontae Mack, he writes in the beginning, spoiler alert, he writes in the beginning, Vontae Mack is someone they're going to take, and they end up taking him, right? No matter what. I'm unveiling my annual Vontae Mack award, the guy I think the Cowboys just kind of end up with no matter what. That's Jacob Rodriguez for me. I just have a weird Vontae Mack connection feeling with Jacob Rodriguez. And part of me wonders if the window for that does start at 20. I think that there's a chance, depending on how the first pick goes, if they get wiped out again at 20 in terms of like a potential edge rusher or something like that they say, you know what, let's go get our guy. We love him. Let's take Jacob Rodriguez. I'm a little skeptical it starts at 20, but I think it's possible. I think that they would prefer to do that at like 39. And I think that they would be jumping over the moon to do that for at that pick if they traded back.
Yeah. So you do know.
But the question is where. I think.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, they like him a lot.
Well, what's not to like, right? He's a turnover machine. He's smart. He's tough. He was even as great as Bailey was for Texas Tech last year. Jacob was kind of the heart of that defense, and so that's the thing for me. I love Sonny Styles, and I think he'd be great. But I think that there are other linebackers that could be good too. I more than anything, what the Cowboys need back there is somebody smart, somebody making the call, somebody who can play the position, and somebody who can do it for more than 2 years. That's been the issue now going back decades with the Cowboys, that they've had no consistency at the position. And whereas in the first, first 30 years of their existence, they had like 4 middle linebackers. And that's an issue. You need that kind of consistency, especially when you're turning over defensive coordinators every couple of years. So they need to see if they can get that. All right. Regardless of what the Cowboys do, trading up or not in the first round, I want each of us to say who we think the Cowboys are going to end up with in that first pick. So, Joe, since you're the expert, we'll start with you. Who will end up being the Cowboys' first pick?
Did I mention I hate this draft? I think it's going to be Caleb Downs. I think he's the best player in the draft. I think that he fits everything Christian Parker wants. I think he would be an extension of Christian Parker. Secondary guy, incredible intelligence, intuitiveness. I don't worry about the lack of athleticism, quote unquote, which I just find so funny that that's become a thing. And I know he didn't, do much of the combine, but like, go watch him play. The dude's a baller. So I think that they end up with Caleb Downs. And I think we're wondering, 30 minutes after the draft, whether or not he's going to hold out 4 years from now, because he's going to be that good, in my opinion. So,
okay, Evan.
Well, Joe once again has thrown me for a loop as usual, because all draft he sounded like Sonny Styles was the guy. Now he's telling me that Caleb Downs is the guy, and I want to believe Joe, but I'm going to go with Sonny Styles.
For a little bit of just explanation on this, Evan, you sounded exactly like my mind right now. To be honest, I've twisted it, I've turned, I've gone all over the place. But Caleb Downs, I just keep coming back to. Sonny Styles, from just a position standpoint, though, also makes. I mean, he's a stud.
Those are 1 and 1A.
If you walk away with one of those two guys as the Cowboys, you are thrilled about what your defense could do potentially next season.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Both those guys play well right away. All right. I'm going to go. I'm saying that Jerry's swinging for the fences here, and they come up with Arvell Reese. And that would take, trading up to either 4 or 5 to get him. But I think that I would feel stronger about that if Jerry hadn't gone out on such a limb about saying, look at all the players we're going to get because of this Micah Parsons trade, right? And by doing that, he's not going to end up with as many guys as he wanted to end up with. And that's the problem. For me, that's the problem with the whole idea of the Cowboys trading up, is that, well, then, Jerry, you lied about that. You didn't do that. But I feel like he thinks we got to come up with a pass rush. And I think probably David Bailey's probably going to be the first of the 2 to go, just because of his pure production in college and the fact that he's really a little quicker. Maybe Reese probably has a higher ceiling, but either one, if the Cowboys ended up with David Bailey or Arvell Reese, that's a home run.
But here's the problem with that, Kevin, is that Jerry also doesn't like to be wrong, right? And like when Jerry traded Micah Parsons, the big reason why was it's a fundamental shift to something, we're going to build from the inside. And you can argue that he's now done that, right? You got Quinnen Williams, you got Kenny Clark. You can make that argument. But I think turning around, giving up probably multiple first-round picks to then acquire a pass rusher that you gave away for multiple first-round picks, that was already in his prime, I feel like that would get ridiculed. And I don't know, or maybe it wouldn't. I don't think that that's something he's willing to face in the mirror. You know what I mean?
I tell Jerry, I promise not to make fun of him. If he does.
Okay, I'll pass that along to him.
Nobody can believe that, Kevin. You can't be held to
that. You're right. I can't.
I think. Okay. One thing that I just keep coming back to for both of you guys, and I'm sure this is what is going on in the room, and I think this is the debate that Jerry's got in his head, is value versus need. And their immediate needs are to improve this defense significantly. And I think that makes much more sense than quote unquote value, because ultimately I think value is overrated at some points in time. You need players who can go out and execute. Forget about how much a draft pick is theoretically worth. You need guys who are going to go out and make an impact on the field. And that's why I feel like they will trade up to get. They're not going to. I think, Kevin, I don't think I'd see Jerry giving up another first-round pick. to go to get Reese or Bailey, but I do see them taking a second or third from next year if they can to move up a few picks to go get.
Yeah. Well, no, I think that's probably more like. I just kind of like the idea of us having one of us saying that they were going to go big. Since you two guys chickened out, I thought I'd.
Fair.
So anyway, we'll see what they do. This ought to be fun, though. I know that, and I know Joe's got a lot of anxiety about all of it. I think it's all great theater. You know, there's nothing really. The whole football season is a letdown for me after the roster building's done. You know, that's my favorite part of all of it. I
You just like
and pretty
spending
much
other
any
people's
sport.
money,
I
Kevin.
love the roster building. I do. I love spending other people's money. It's the greatest, you know. So anyway, Joe, we appreciate it, and I'll be out there this week, and we'll spend some time
Yep,
together.
that sounds like a
Wednesday
plan.
and Thursday.
I can't wait. It's like I said, I love and hate this draft so much. I hate it from like a pre-scouting, trying to figure out what they're going to do perspective because there's so many options. I'm gonna love what happens Thursday. It's going to be entertaining as heck. Not that the NFL needs more promotion. I'm stoked, so I can't wait.
Hey, Joe,
Yeah,
before
it'll
you
be
go,
great.
got a quick
All right.
question for you. Like when Kevin comes out and you guys have some good fellowship out there at the draft or at a Cowboy game, does he sit next to you and then say, "Hey, what's the story on this or what's the story on that?" In like with a media guide right in front of him that he could look at?
So he has done that. But what makes you think he's actually sitting next to me? You know, like that's the thing. Is like Kevin likes to be in the back. He doesn't like to hang out with me. Like you know, it's just I'm trying not to. I'm trying not to take it personally.
Oh,
You know, but I mean
no,
it is what it is.
no,
Let me just say,
let's not
can I
do
just
that.
say this before
You
we
know,
let Joe go? Kevin, we love you. We love hanging out with you. You're the best teammate a guy could have. Before we get out of here today, I want to talk a little bit about the column you wrote last week where you took a really good stance on the Paige Bucker's Azzi Fudd more Dallas Wings kerfluffle. But we love having you out at events and we love helping you. We love helping you out, Miss Daisy.
well, I couldn't do this stuff if it weren't for you guys. You guys do all the legwork. I'm just coming in for just a mop up. That's all I'm doing.
We appreciate you.
All right, Joe, we
Sounds good.
appreciate it, bud. We'll see you. It's all good. Um, let's talk about those Rangers, Evan.
Sure. I'm an open book, Kevin, and so are the Rangers.
Yeah, man, they are just all over the map. I mean, they're and it's not even like it's one game at a time. It's like for 2 or 3 games they'll play really well, and then for 2 or 3 games they'll play not so well. And we knew going in this was going to be a really tough part of their schedule. The very toughest part of their schedule this season was going to be the first month, and so far they're holding their own. But does that make you feel good about their prospects at this point?
You asked me this yesterday via a text, and I'm not sure I gave you a clear answer because I don't I don't think 22 games in as we record this that I've got a clear answer. I think the starting pitching is pretty good. I've been encouraged by the adjustments that Josh Young has made at the plate, and the last 10 days he's hit the ball as well as he's hit at any point in time in his career. That's encouraging. Jake Berger is driving the ball. That's encouraging. I'm pretty sure that Wyatt Langford and Corey Seager are going to get going here. So I feel like the offense is going to be better than it
Brandon
was.
Nimmo, you left out him, best player on
Brandon
the team
Nimmo
so
is
far.
at the top is nothing short of a revelation. Um, but
And Evan
man,
Carter's not been bad. He's been okay.
yeah, I mean, like I said, I think the offense is going to be better than it was. I think there's some elements of slow starts, and I think that there's been some concern about the second base situation with Josh Smith not producing, and that the defense has gone backwards a little bit. But for me, the overriding thing remains the bullpen. And I just think they're getting very quickly to critical mass in the bullpen. You've already lost 3 relievers. You didn't really have 3 relievers in the system that were going to be real viable options. And you may end up with Robert Garcia on the IL before it's all over with. And so they're really scrambling. They brought up a rookie in Gavin Collyer who, bless his heart, has really looked really looked good in his first couple of outings. Um, but there's nobody on the 40-man roster who's terribly attractive as an option for that bullpen. And I just think you've got so many guys in unfamiliar roles. It really puts this team in a precarious position. Um, less than a month into the season.
Yeah, and this, of course, is the product of the owner cutting the payroll and not and Chris Young not being able to go out and make some signings for the bullpen, some quality signings for the bullpen. Now, some of this problem is, as you said, it's just injury related, and you're going to have, even if you'd sign guys, you'd still be in a hole if those guys were getting hurt. But they kind of done this with smoke and mirrors so far. I mean, they have, the bullpen is not really cost them a lot in this start. I wouldn't blame the bullpen for their
No, no.
for the issues.
And
So
and listen,
it's
Kevin, I mean, just overall record at 11-11, 22 games into the season, given the strength of schedule, I don't think I could have seen the Rangers off to much better of a start. Maybe they could have won one of those games against Cincinnati, but I certainly didn't have them sweeping Seattle at home. So I think it all washes out, and that I would have expected them to be right at 500 at this point.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That was because if they started the season, 7-15, which was entirely possible, then yeah, then you go, okay, well that's it. They're not going to, maybe they can recover from this start, but they're not going to recover enough for probably to get the owner to commit to making a trade. Although I say that, and the trade deadline is in freaking August. you know, and and let me just say something about that. Can we move up the trade deadline? Wouldn't it be better if it was in July? What's the point of making a move in August?
Yeah, well, I mean, the trade deadline has been moved back 3 days to August 3rd this year. Um, and I don't know that those 3 days make a ton of difference, but you certainly could make a case that why don't you move the deadline up a little bit to, I don't know, the weekend after the All-Star game. I mean, because you could have
Yeah,
GMs spending the whole All-Star break basically trying to make all their moves and be in position. I'm sure the GMs would like to actually have some time during the All-Star break to catch their breath and see their families. But yeah, your trade deadline is basically at the 2/3 mark of the season, so yeah, you could move it up a little bit for me.
yeah. What's the problem with that? Well, the Rangers could certainly use it because that's the thing. They're on a lifeline now. And that's the problem here is because of the cut budget. It was one thing if you Oh, I don't know. It none of it ever really made any sense because you made the commitment to the team with the big contracts already, right? The sunk costs of Corey Seager and Jacob deGrom and Nathan Eovaldi and all that. Those are sunk costs, and you have already made this commitment. To me, in my mind, the issue with Ray Davis in that from that standpoint is that you have to let this play itself out. Maybe not necessarily, Seager's contract because it goes into the next century, but certainly DeGrom's. When you have that kind of potential, and after the performance you got last year from those guys, and we've said this over and over again, if the Rangers offense just got back to league average, with that starting rotation, well then, yeah, you got a legitimate playoff chance here. And then who knows what happens when you get in the playoffs. So those were all kind of givens. And that's why I just felt like, that was what was foolish for Ray to think that, well, no, I want to see some production here before I commit to it. Well, you pretty much just pulled the rug out from under your president here by having this kind of budget.
Right, and like an oil and gas and energy guy, right? The investment is all on the exploration, right? You invest all this money up front to explore and seek the talent, then you pull it back after you're getting results. And so this seems like it's like you pull back some of the investment after you're getting results, and it seems like this is the inverse of what you would think Ray's business policy would be. I just think I think Ray is He's looking at 27 more than he's looking at 26, to be perfectly honest, and he's looking at what the new labor situation is going to be, if there is anything new, and so he feels like he'd like to not invest a whole bunch of money right now he may he may be on the hook for when a new CBA comes around. And I just think that that's just not that doesn't connect with what you need to do. You've got an older club. I think their major league average for their position players is like the third or fourth oldest lineup in baseball, and their starting rotation is certainly one of the older ones in baseball, even with the two younger guys in it. But the fact that they did not go commit to money for relievers, just hinders them so much, man. I don't know any other way to say it. I mean, I'm over explaining it, I guess, but they needed to invest some money in relievers. That said, they could have invested $20 million in Edwin Diaz and have lost him for the bulk of the season. So
Yeah.
I think there was a happy medium there, and there were some guys to go out and get, and I just feel like the Rangers. I feel like Rangers ownership didn't give Chris Young the the full resources to go out and do that, especially with the fact that the minor league system is thin on upper level relief pitching.
Yeah, that's the issue here for me too, is that, and this is why I picked the Mariners to win it, not only because they got so far last year, and because they have such a good lineup and they have such a tremendous rotation, is because they've got a great farm system, and so whatever holes they have, they're going to be able to fill those. That's just going to be a non-issue in Seattle. That's not the case with the Rangers. I think the Rangers lineup can compete with Seattle's, and I think their pitching can compete with Seattle's. I don't, I think that the Mariners have a better rotation, a deeper rotation than the Rangers do. They got a better one than anybody. I think that's the best rotation in baseball.
Yeah,
So I think that they can do all those things, but boy, they're at their limit. They don't have the depth of resources that Seattle has, and so
yeah,
and I know this is frustrating to Chris Young, because when your owner is not helping you any here, then that's just really that's frustrating, because just what you pointed out. Listen, it doesn't matter what happens in 2027 or 2028, because Jacob DeGrom's not going to be here then, and probably Nathan Eovaldi's not going to be here then. So Mackenzie Gore will be probably, but is he going to be able to front the rotation? Was Jack Leiter going to be good enough? Is Kumar Rocker going to be good enough? I don't
yeah,
know.
right.
I don't know if they're going to be I don't think that any of those guys is going to be as good as Jacob DeGrom or Nathan Eovaldi. I'm just going to say that. Those two guys, I mean, DeGrom's a Hall of Famer probably, and Eovaldi's a fringe Hall of Fame. He's not going to get in the Hall of Fame, but he's at least a guy, who has that kind of respect.
Eovaldi's an
You,
all-time competitor.
he is, and I would say that I'd put those two starters right there when they're at their best in the top 10 of Rangers all-time starters.
Oh, for sure.
So
But look,
so that's
last
something.
week they beat the Mariners and they outpitched them, and that was the story of that series. This week in Seattle, the Mariners starting rotation was better than the Rangers, and so I think that look, the top three and what we saw in both of those series was the top three going at one another. Um, I think that it's basically a wash there between 1, 2, and 3. Um, but go to the back of the game. It's a one-run game at the end of the game, and Jacob Junis has been great so far, and Jacob Latz has been great so far. But the Mariners have Andres Munoz sitting out there. They've got the best closer in the American League in my mind, maybe the
Yeah.
best closer in baseball. And I don't know that the Rangers have the same kind of security in closing out games. All of that said, Seattle's off to not a great start. So the fact that the Rangers have a little bit of a better start than Seattle, I think is a good indicator for the Rangers, because they need to take, and I guess that's for me the one thing that kind of stunk about the weekend was if the Rangers had won another game in Seattle, if they had won that series, and it would have been the first series that they'd won there since 23, I think they just really could have sent a message that we're right here with you.
Well, you're 4-2 against them so far. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I'd have taken that going into the season to think that they would be up ahead of them. I just think it's inevitable that Seattle that's just baseball over the course of a 162 game season. The better team rises to the top most of the time. And so I think that I still think the Mariners are going to win the division. They just have too much going for them, and that offense will finally get going at some point. Because right now it's been terrible. But the real shame of it is going to be if the Rangers' offense continues to improve, and if the starting pitching continues to be pretty good, and they just flame out because they don't have enough relievers.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing for me is like I feel like things are trending pretty well for the offense, and I think that the starting rotation has been great. And I think the bullpen has been great, but I don't know that I have the same confidence in the bullpen being able to withstand the next 5 months that I do on the offense continuing to get better and the starting rotation to continue to maintain their performance. So look, if they can get a half season out of this bullpen and scramble around, and they are in a position where they start to take advantage of a schedule that turns for them in June, uh, then I hope Ray Davis is willing to go out and add. The problem then, just like you said, is it's not just about money then, unless you're buying bad contracts. It's about having talent to trade for other guys, and I'm not sure I see a bunch of talent that's available right now in the Rangers organization.
And the ESPN trade tracker, I guess what you could call it, they had Jose Cornell being the guy that they would dangle. Do you think that that's a possibility?
Well, certainly, but you know, yeah, I mean, if they could trade Jose Cornell for a starter, I mean, for a reliever, I think that's something they certainly would consider. Uh, but that's about the best they've got. That's
Yeah,
the best they've got to offer. It's their one shot, really, in my mind.
yeah, yeah. That's not good.
And Kevin, for all that said, I mean, if you run into trouble, and Cornell is still recovering from his fractured hand, you run into trouble in the rotation later on this season. If you get an injury, who's your starter that you're gonna turn to? Right
Right.
now, it's either Cal Quantrill or Austin Gomber who are in the minor leagues. The only guy on the 40-man roster who is a potential starter for you is Jose Cornell.
Yeah.
So, um, you could be robbing from Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah. No question about that. Uh, I think probably what ends up happening, don't you, is they just get creative here. They start thinking about different ways to handle the book. I mean, they already have, right? I mean, you got Jacob Latz throwing multiple innings at the end of games. And you know what? I don't have a problem with that. If there's a way that you could, ideally, everybody, and we talked about this earlier, baseball is very has a tendency to be stuck in the mud about lots of things. If this season seems to me to scream, we're just going to have to do something different. We can't do what everybody else does. We can't do what we want to do. We have to do whatever we can do to make this bullpen work. And if that means that we don't have roles for anybody, if that means that we're somebody who pitches the seventh might pitch the eighth and ninth too, all of that, then that's what we got to do. And if it's just going to be all hands on deck every night.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the approach that Skip has shown here after the first week of the season. Since Robert Garcia and Chris Martin didn't get the job done, I think it's like we'll scramble as long as we need to scramble. The issue here is, right, you are pitching Jacob Latz. Jacob Latz is your most valuable reliever, and you're pitching him in leverage situations right now. And you pitched him 3 straight days in Sacramento and Seattle,
Yeah,
which was
that's
really
got. I'm sure that's the first time in his life, right?
I need to go back and double check that, but very possibly. But the point is, I mean, Latz is so valuable to the team. Like he would be your first option in all that you'd like to have as a starter if you need a starter, right?
Sure.
But right now you can't possibly afford to take him out of the bullpen. And
Let's go back and address that because going into the season, I
and
was
let me just say
not
this, right?
for it. I was not
Let me
for him being put in the bullpen, but
right.
now he is the saving grace of that bullpen. No one
He
else could have done what he's doing.
he's doing a great job in the bullpen. And but let me just say this that you'd love you had this weekend, you had DeGrom go 4 innings because of pitch count. You had Evaldi go 5 1/3, and you had Gore go 5. Those would be perfect situations in close games to go to Latz for 2 innings to get you through the sixth and the seventh, or the fifth and
Right.
the sixth. But you're having to save him for the seventh and the eighth
Yeah.
because you have nobody else. So it just creates a mad scramble. Guys out there have done a good job. Tyler Alexander has done a good job in a higher leverage role than he's ever had. Jacob Junis has done a great job in the closer's role. Gavin Collyer has been really impressive in his first 2 times out. But it is just going to be a mad scramble all year. And anytime you have a guy hit a little bit of a slump, or God forbid another injury, how do you cover those holes?
Let's talk about Gavin Collyer because he presents something that no one else in the bullpen does. A, his stuff plays up in the upper 90s, and B, the arm slot's a little different. Looks like he's throwing from shortstop. That's a really great combination. Most of the time, you get a guy with a funky arm slot. He's flipping frisbees up there. So this is a guy who could, now this is would require a lot, right? But I will say this also: any team that goes into a season and goes deep into the playoffs gets something from somebody they weren't expecting,
Right.
uh, and I think uh, and certainly the Rangers are due from that standpoint of somebody from the back of the bullpen to come up and do something. And look, they have gotten, I say that, but they have gotten production from people, and usually it's from outside the organization. It's somebody
Right.
they bring in on a 1 year deal, and they do a nice job for them, and I commend them for that approach. Going back to the whole thing about Ray Davis and building a bullpen. Um, I don't really have a big problem with not giving huge contracts to relievers because more often than not, I think those are probably the flakiest contracts you do is for a closer, right?
Sure.
Uh, I think that we know that about pitchers anyway. That pitching contracts are the worst ones you give out. You're spending the most money, and you're really rolling the dice because they get hurt more often than position players do. But you needed somebody to do something for him. Well, uh, could he be that guy for the Rangers this year?
Listen, I'm gonna relate a story. Former Ranger, that I had in Florida, Robb Nen, and he couldn't throw a strike to save his life. He showed the slightest bit of improvement early in, I think it was the '95 season. The Marlins lost Brian Harvey, and Renee Latchman had no choice but to like throw Robb Nen into the closer's role. And nearly 300 saves later, Robb Nen was one of the best closers of the '90s and early 2000s. So it happens, and there's no explanation for it. If Collier throws strikes, he's really, really good. I can't tell you about the arm slot because I'm just not educated enough to be able to tell the difference from being 3/4 to like being 5/8. But that's what Skip says, is that he is, the arm slot is a little bit lower, and it feels like it's coming from either shortstop or third base. He's used both positions in the last week to describe where it's coming from. But there's no denying the velocity, and there's no denying that he's got a really good breaking ball. And if he can throw strikes in the zone, which he's done in these first 2 outings, it's very tantalizing, and it could be that guy who steps forward. And let me just say this: that of all the guys of the surprise guys who you need to step forward, He'd be the least surprising of the surprise guys because of the stuff and where the positioning was. So Skip's a big fan. He saw him all last year in Double A. Loved him in spring training. He's made a really good impression, and hopefully he can keep this up for this club because he does add a dynamic that I think both you and I feel is an imperative for a contending team is to have at least one real legitimate power arm in your bullpen, hopefully, to pitch in the later innings.
Yeah, he looks like it to me. I mean, it feels like, of course, I haven't seen him pitch that much, but it feels like to me that the issues with control for a guy like him is when he's trying to hit a corner, which, when to me, when you throw like he does, just throw it over the plate. The ball's moving so much, and it's got so much velocity. Just throw it over the plate and let it move on its own, and not being trying to hit this corner, not be trying to hit that corner. Let's just throw it.
Let me ask you a question. Could you tell that his arm slot was different, or did you get that
Yeah.
from Skip's comment?
I didn't hear Skip say that.
Oh, okay.
No, you can tell that he's because he's throwing down here. It's a little, it's not sidearm, but it is like 3/4. So yeah, it's different for a guy. That was always the thing. The limited amount of baseball that I played. When a guy's throwing like that, especially if it was a right-hander, it just felt like this pitch is going to hit me right in the head. Because of when they're coming like that. So it is intimidating,
It,
and it's just got so much movement on it, and it just makes a difference. With everybody else, they got to be perfect. He doesn't have to be perfect.
and listen, to your point about throwing it over the plate, Skip made this point as well that this guy had a ridiculous percentage of swing and miss in the zone last year because of some of the traits of that fastball, because of the deception of where it comes out, because of the velocity, and I think because of the angle at which it gets to the plate. Skip cited that he had 40% swing and miss over the course of the season. I can't find Double A numbers at Frisco, but those are ridiculous numbers, and it just goes to that point. They can simply reinforce to him, you don't have to be fine. You have to throw it over the plate because your fastball has the ability to overpower hitters per se. And I
And
think
that's the
Gavin
definition
is,
of a closer, actually. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
and that,
and I think Gavin is certainly responded to that.
well, we'll see. We'll see how he does. It at least gives them an option there, and I think that probably this is what's going to end up happening. I see them making moves at the deadline. I frankly think that they will just be reinforcements. I don't see anybody riding to the rescue, just because I don't think they have the material to trade, and I don't know how much Chris Young wants to gamble on people. I know I talked to him, a little bit this spring about Cole Reagans, and I said, hey man, flags fly forever, right? You get a Aroldis Chapman, you may not get to the playoffs if you don't have a Aroldis Chapman coming in and doing what he did during the summer. And he goes, yeah, people want to say that all the time, but I didn't. Basically, he felt like that was a mistake, and we'll see what the long term prognosis is on Cole. He's had a lot of injury issues, and we'll see what he does from here on out. But I did get the impression that uh, I want a general manager, and he's the president, but he's essentially making all the calls. I want one who is willing to make moves to help you win. And is not afraid to make those trades, and not afraid to end up losing one of those.
All
And
the
as
stuff we talked about with value and all this stuff on the Cowboys segment with Joe. None of that applies to Chris Young. He will make moves to help this team win. If he sees an opening that would allow this team to win, he's very much in the modern day Dave Dombrowski school of, you know what, prospects are prospects, but I've got a chance to win at the big league level, and that's what matters. And so I have no doubt that if this team plays well and puts themselves in position where they are a contender in the second half of the season, Chris Young is going to do everything he can to get Ray Davis to expand the payroll, and he will not hesitate to make trades from his minor league system with whatever he's got.
Well, and from my standpoint, and certainly from any fan standpoint, they should applaud that. Anybody at this point, and I think there for a long time in the Rangers fandom, there was that fascination with prospects, right? Oh, this guy's going to be great. He's going to be the next really great player, and this is going to be so terrific. And they never wanted you to trade anybody. After you win a World Series, and after you've been there and seen what that's like, I think that all goes out the window. I think at that point you say, no, the whole deal is not that your goal is waiting for the next Pudge Rodriguez. That's not your goal. Your goal is to win a World Series. And hopefully this fan base realizes that and appreciates it, because to me that's my favorite aspect of Chris Young in the first place, is that the guy, I think he recognizes pitching, and that's something that no other GM has really been able to do in this organization's history, in my estimation. And B, that he is willing to make the call when he has to. And I've told you before, my two favorite GMs in sports are Howie Roseman for the Eagles and Dave Dombrowski, who's they're just not afraid. They're smart guys, and their attitude is that we may end up losing this, and I don't care. We're rolling our dice now, and they've got the track record to show for it.
Yeah, I feel this is just a personal note, but I feel very fortunate to have covered Dave for 3 years. He is going to be in the Hall of Fame. He is the modern day template for a GM who will go for it, and I think both those guys are perfect in the cities in which they're in Philadelphia, where it is win,
I never
baby,
thought about that.
win.
Both in Philly, my two favorite guys, both in
Yeah.
Philly. Yeah, and that's where they should be.
So.
Yeah, that's all
Kevin, before we get out of here, I do want to. I do want to. I know we're running a little bit long, but I do want to ask you. You wrote a column last week about going out to the Wings and raising a question about Paige Beckers and Azzi Fudd and the fact that they are or had reportedly been in a relationship, as of a year ago, and that the Mavericks shut that down. And I thought your take was great on that whole thing. I just want you to explain, I think, again, for the listeners, what your issue was here. I don't think your issue was with Azzi or with Paige, but more with the Wings approach.
Well, there's no question about that. I mean, look, just as a quick background here, they were obviously teammates at UConn, and they last July, Paige put out on TikTok that they were in a relationship. So, she got a big following. Everybody knew that. And then 8 months ago in Glamour magazine, they did a joint interview about their relationship. So it's well founded. But my point, and for the column that I wrote after that, and even going into this, was that, okay, are they still in a relationship? Because as we know, they're a couple of 20-somethings, and people are kind of get in and out of relationships all the time. So I need to know, are y'all still in a relationship? And and the reason I asked that was because I think that creates some issues on a team when two teammates are in a relationship. The Wings had that last year on their team. Neither one of those players is on the team anymore. It has worked well in other places where there were couples and they won titles. It's happened a couple of times. So that was the question I asked was, first of all, Azzi, are you in a relationship or still with Paige, as you all announced last summer? And B, if so, have you all talked to any other couples in the league and how they negotiate that dynamic? And quickly, the question was cut off. Now, we were, there was a feeling that they were not going to answer that question. They put that out there, not to me, but they did to other people, that we were not going to answer any questions about this as an organization. But of course, my question wasn't to the organization. My question was to Azzi. And afterwards, I talked to Kurt Miller, the GM of the Wings, and he said, we are never going to comment on players' personal lives. And I said, well, my question to you is not, or my question wasn't to the organization, it was to her. And also, I felt like I wanted to know whose idea was it for this not to happen? Was this the WNBA's edict? Was it the Wings? Did the players ask for this not to happen? I just have a hard time imagining the fact that you make an announcement on TikTok, then you do an interview with Glamour magazine, and then you say, we're not going to talk about it. I mean, we're not even going to acknowledge it. I'm not asking for an explanation of the relationship. I just wanted a yes or no. That would have sufficed for me. And then we could have moved on from there. But they didn't allow that to happen, and they ended up making it a much bigger story than it should have been. Of course, it all got crazy after that, and which is fine, and I don't have a problem with any of that either. People can say and do what they want to do, misguided as it may be. But I think it's just silly not to acknowledge that, because by doing it that way, it makes it seem like we're hiding something, or we're not, or we're ashamed of something. It's like, what are we ashamed of here? Acknowledging that these two players are in a relationship, which in fact, as I've seen some things since then to indicate that maybe they are not in a relationship any longer. And if that's the case, they could have said that, either way, it's fine. I just think that, especially in a world where how many marketplaces can spouses work together? Most places don't allow it. And there's a reason why they don't allow it. On a basketball team, it's the smallest organization ever, right? And you're going to have two people on the same floor at the same time who might be in a relationship. I just don't, I don't think that that's always such a great thing. And when you have the first pick of the draft, it better really be a no-brainer. You could have taken, Olivia Miles, the point guard from TCU. They could have used a point guard. You could have taken Aba Fam, the center from Spain. She's
handled all the way around on the Wings part. I in every interview I've heard with Azzi Fudd has been, the words have been exceptional. She expresses herself very, very well. I think if she did not want to answer that question, she would have been able to give you listen, I'd prefer not to talk about that today, and that would have been that. And people could have speculated whatever they wanted to speculate. I just think the Wings made it's a self-inflicted wound for the Wings. But I want to applaud you for writing a really eloquent column about a difficult subject and doing it with grace and respect and dignity.
Well, I appreciate that, Evan. Thanks very much. Just part of the job. It's just one of the things we got to do. It's the big leagues, and I want all the franchises here to act like they're in the big leagues, and they just haven't always done that. And I think that they need to understand that nothing against Abilene or Midland, but this ain't Midland or Abilene. It's Dallas. It's the fourth largest market in the country. And
for our millions of listeners in Abilene and Midland, I did not say that. Kevin did.
And listen, I love Abilene and Midland. I shouldn't have said that. I love those towns, but
I used to love going to Hardin Simmons when I covered the Transamerica Athletic Conference back in college.
Really? Transamerica. Wow.
Yeah, we went to Abilene every year for that big Georgia State Hardin Simmons rivalry.
How about that? Hardin Simmons. All right. Well, that's going to do it for our podcast this week. We thank you for coming on and holding on this long. I don't know if you were still around to hear the end of this, but it's a long one. But that's okay. We like to mix it up a little bit every once in a while. So from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.